There's another big story in the past week here in New Mexico. Attorney General Hector Balderas filed a complaint at the end of last Friday against Secretary of State Diana Duran. The complaint includes 64 charges such as embezzlement, money laundering, and fraud, among other charges. Ms. Duran is accused of moving campaign funds into her personal bank accounts and then making large withdrawals at casinos around the state. Some have called for Ms. Duran to resign, but her attorney told local media this week she will fight the charges in court. And Laura, House Democrats are already talking about impeachment, and I have to include Don Tripp is already talking about impeachment. He's no Democrat, that's for sure. A long process, and I think for everyone's sake, we could hope there's a resignation before it comes to that. We have to spend time with this. However, I have to say, let me ask you this. How did it strike you when you first read about this? Because the woman makes $85,000 a year. Her husband makes some income as well. This was a serious gambling problem, by any stretch, when you're down to like $2 during the Christmas season, moving money around. It was very sad to read, actually.
It was really sad to read. I was shocked. because, it's a lot of money, $150,000 that gets, taken out at Sandia Resort. That's a lot. It's a lot of money for anybody. That's that's a very good salary in New Mexico, annual salary in New Mexico. Right. For that amount to be taken out in a year, and just the year before $95,000. That's right. That's a serious problem. And I'm not sure if it's she has the problem or if her husband has the problem, or maybe they both have the gambling problem. Right. Either way, it's really troubling. And so for me, I've been treasurer of campaigns before. Mm-hmm. I've done many of the filing of reports, and I have a personal rule. I'm an attorney, and I feel like I always have to uphold my ethics. I have to make sure that my candidates share with me their bank information as well as their information on the Secretary of State's office website, so that I can reconcile everything. And I won't be a treasurer or do any reports unless I can reconcile everything that we're seeing in and out. Right. Not everybody has that rule when they do treasurers. It's very lax in New Mexico. People they name someone as treasurer, but they actually do their own reports. So my question was, it had to be more than just Diana Duran that was aware that there were problems. Where were these people? Why didn't they raise this issue ahead of time? Why didn't they say something to the secretary or say something to someone else? It's really troubling.
I'm wondering, Dan, I don't know if this is factual or not, if the casinos flag these things, if there's I wouldn't think.
I don't know.
They're in the business of taking people's money, not exactly.
So the thing to remember too, also, Gene, a couple things. One, to touch on what Laura was saying, remember our campaign finance laws are all voluntary. It's self-reporting, it's self-filling out forms. The Secretary of State really has no teeth in what they can do to stop that. The one thing I will say, Gene, to something you said earlier that I'm a little troubled by is you said, I hope there'll be a resignation, and sooner rather than later. If she's done something, she should be held accountable. If she's done something, she should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. But I think, Don Tripp isn't talking about impeachment. What Don Tripp said was, if we've got to go down that road, we got to get our stuff together. It's probably going to take a special session. We got to appoint people. Right. The one that I think's got egg on their face, in my opinion, is Representative Egoff. Representative Egoff, the report comes out Friday, and the next day he's calling for an impeachment. And, here you are, the Democrat leader in the House. That's really the jury. You're going to be the one that decides. You're like the indictment group. You're going to decide, the grand jury, if this goes to the Senate. And, without anything being out there other than the Attorney General's indictment, his letter, his charges, that Diana Duran says she's going to fight vigorously, Brian Egoff's reached a conclusion that she's guilty and should be impeached. And so I think that clearly, again, not to distract, that if Diana Duran did this, she should be held accountable. I'm not defending her actions if she's guilty. I just believe she deserves her day in court. And I will tell you, as the only person who sat through an impeachment in New Mexico, I was in the legislature when we impeached the state treasurer. We did the process to get him impeached, and he resigned. I got to compliment, Kenny Martinez and the former state representative Eric Youngberg, who passed away. They were co-chairs of the impeachment deal, and I got to tell you, there was very little info. There was very few comments out there in the media. They did a great job of saying this is not a Republican-Democrat issue. This is a state constitutional issue, and it's a crisis. And we got to handle this correctly. And I just would argue that I don't think Representative Egoff has stepped forward as a statesman to handle this. I think he's shown his partisan stride to do this. I think at the end of the day, it's going to be interesting to see where this comes out, because, whether it's the $8,000 that some are saying, all the stuff from the Attorney General is really amounts to nothing more than $8,000. Well, if it's $8,000 or 8 cents, it's wrong. It shouldn't be any different if it was 8,000 or 800,000.
She's due her due process.
She is, and I think we should let her do that. And,
Yeah.
and I think it's a sad time. You know, the news has reported out, what, she's the 3rd Secretary of State now to have this some sort of issue there. And the last thing is, you know, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. The governor's clearly, if this deal is cut and she resigns or is impeached, the governor gets to appoint someone. Does the governor appoint an office holder that's going to step up and say, look, let's get to 2016? Or does the governor go out and appoint someone that's going to run for office and they use this time to run for office? That's the next big question.
It all becomes political at the end of the day, that's for sure. She is due her due process, Rob. There's no question about that. But, you know, you have to think with 64 counts, Mr. Balderas has, you know, dotted his I's and crossed his T's and all this kind of thing. You know, what kind of pressure to perform can there be after something like this? She can hang in there, certainly, but what are we to expect from the office if she's to hang in there?
And yeah, you certainly have to give her the benefit of the doubt, or at least due process. However, I mean, this is the Secretary of State's office. She's overseeing elections. She's also checking out whether or not people have made proper or improper campaign donations. She's totally compromised in this situation. So I think there's no other recourse. And it's also very interesting and it's very telling that Governor Martinez and Speaker Tripp haven't gone out of their way to say, hey, well, this is a partisan witch hunt or something like that. You know, they're saying if these counts are true, if these allegations are true, she has to step down. I just don't see from a practical political standpoint how she can hang in there for very long.
Same point to you, Sophie. You know, the practicalities of the matter. If she's,
It's interesting, actually, that we're having this conversation having just talked about former Superintendent Valentino and the pressure on him to resign, the pressure now on the Secretary of State to resign. You know, I think that there is, I'm just going to just put this out there, I think there is this perception that she is personally, literally going through filings and monitoring, you know, new corporations that are being put together and things like that. No, she leads a division. And so I think we can expect that that office will continue to work at about the same level it's been working.
For 50
no comments, no comments there. At about the same level that it's been working. While she is dealing with the legal issues that she confronts and allegedly created, it is important to know, and we've talked about due process here, and I just want to agree with part of what Dan said, although perhaps not the spin that Dan put on it, which is that it is important that that due process, that go forward, independent of the issue of whether or not she resigns, whether she's impeached, et cetera. We need to see, as a state, we need to see that legal process go forward. We need to see the Attorney General pursue the case. We need to, you know, we need to see that happen. Chances are good there's a settlement at some point, you know, and we may end up where we ended up with the superintendent, but allegations have made, they haven't yet been proven.
That's right.
We need to see that happen.
Laura, interestingly, during the campaign season, both Megan Toulouse-Oliver, her opponent at the time, and Diana Duran sat right here in this studio. It was interesting to think back on that when I was getting ready for the taping for the show. She ostensibly won the seat by being more credible about the idea of being a better watchdog about dollars and cents and voting and all that kind of thing. I've got to think a lot of people who voted for her are profoundly disappointed in this kind of a situation, because she really put it out there that this is, I am the watchdog. I will be the person that, you know, that could watch over all of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of people are probably regretting that decision. You know, she also won with a lot of Democrat support when she was running against Marietta, and you know, in the context of that, Marietta, there were so many allegations of impropriety with her administration that Diana Duran looked like she was definitely the better option at that point. And so I think there's a lot of people rethinking sort of who they gave their vote to. But you know, back to something that Sophie said about there being a possible settlement, I don't see that in this situation because this is a criminal matter. I mean, Valentino was facing, you know, that was his contract. It was an employment matter. And he didn't, you know, he hadn't done something.
You're right, and I meant plea, but yes.
Yeah, so I'm sorry, so there would be, you know, potentially a plea bargain of some sort, which makes sense in terms of expediting everything that goes on, but certainly not a settlement in terms of her receiving anything.
That's right.
Because that's not sort of the issue.
But I will say, you know,
Right.
I will say this, you know, I think Sophie's right. The office functions, obviously there's people there, but I think the problem, certainly the problem that I have with her continuing in this role is that if she doesn't have, if she doesn't have the integrity to be able to tell the difference between, not taking campaign contributions and depositing them in her personal bank account and not filing, truthful reports, I have to question whether she has the right, whether she's exercising good judgment and whoever she appoints in certain positions to do this kind of work. Because, anybody who's ever been a leader of an organization, you lead by example. So, whatever tone you're setting, you expect your employees to follow suit. If she's got this many problems, what does that say about her employees, and, who are they turning to for examples?
So I would tell you,
Again, from a practical standpoint, I remember about 4 years ago, Representative Garcia got in trouble with some campaign donations. Gotti Schwartz, who was working at Channel 4, tracked her down. And that happens fairly frequently, where there's debates about campaign contributions from candidates. If you're in a situation where she is, and her office sends down a penalty or or launches an investigation, the person who's going to be accused is going to say, well, you've got your own problems. I just don't see any way out of this.
I would tell you the only person, I would tell you right now, the only people that are probably more nervous about what's going on right now than Diana Duran is the legislators themselves. Because this is a process that nobody's watching. The campaign reports, again, it's a self-reporting, there's no teeth. The Secretary of State has no authority to go out and say, I don't like this.
We've seen sort of at the same time that these allegations came out, we see candidates underreporting, information not being shared with the Secretary of State's office, and that's small dollars compared to what we see from Ms. Duran. But there is real concern about why are we not getting the full picture from that report.
And remember that there's been, whether it's Common Cause, doesn't matter who, there's been years they've been trying to change the system.
Exactly right.
And you got to go to the very people. You got to go to the very people that you're asking to, put the microscope on and say, do you guys want that light on me? And it's not going to happen. So I would tell you that I'm not a legal eagle to use the right term, but I don't think this goes much further. I think either Diana Duran's going to have her moments and something's going to happen to where they're going to withdraw some of this stuff and she's going to be found that this didn't happen, or she's going to come forward and say, look, I've got this issue, I'm moving on in life, I'm sorry.
I'm going to rehab.
I'm going to rehab. And I think it's going to, because I think right now, there's a large percentage of legislators sitting around right now sweating like crazy saying, oh my gosh, if the AG is looking here, who's next? And I don't think any of them want to be looked at.
There you go. Up next, we hear how top federal law enforcement officials are collaborating with medical professionals to address heroin addiction in our state.